Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Kompasa. Today I'm going to talk about what U.S. officials advise Ukraine to do regarding their offensive, their awaited offensive, to take back Crimea, as they always talk about. And also the advice they give to Ukraine to divert from Bakhmut and the Russian advances towards two towns in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. So if we start here, U.S. officials advise Ukraine to wait on offensive, official says. And this is from Reuters. So senior U.S. officials are advising Ukraine to hold off on launching a major offensive against Russian forces until the latest supply of U.S. weaponry is in place and training has been provided, a senior Biden administration official said on Friday. The official, speaking to a small group of reporters on condition of anonymity, said the United States was holding fast to its decision to not provide Abrams tanks to Ukraine at this time amid a controversy with Germany over tanks. As I discussed before, these Western-made tanks are not going to really do much of a difference on the battlefield itself. The Abrams tanks, as far as I know, what I've heard from experts like Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor and others, is that, and Brian Bereletich from the new Atlas, is that, the Abrams tank is, if I understood it correctly, is more suited for wars in the Middle East rather than the muddy conditions of Ukraine. And then there is the aspect that Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian army have been working with mostly Soviet-made weaponry. So it's going to take a lot of time to educate them or train them in using these Western-made tanks and weapons, unless you are pouring in a bunch of Western mercenaries in there, which there are already plenty of in Ukraine. And it wasn't too long ago that a American mercenary was actually killed in Bakhmut. It was a couple of days ago, I think. So, President Joe Biden, who approved a new $2.5 billion weapons package for Ukraine this week, told reporters at the White House Ukraine is going to get all the help they need. When asked if he supports Poland's intention to send German-made Leopard tanks to Ukraine, U.S. talks with Ukraine on any counteroffensive have been in the context of ensuring the Ukrainians devote enough time first to training on the latest weaponry provided by the United States, the official said. The U.S. officials believe an offensive would stand to be more successful should the Ukrainians take advantage of the training and the significant infusion of new weaponry. The United States on Thursday, announced it will send hundreds of armored vehicles to Ukraine for use in the fight. A high-ranking U.S. delegation that included Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and Deputy White House National Security Advisor John Finner was in Kiev in recent days for the talks with Ukrainian officials. Well, in fact, I just saw a small video clip, I think it was with Wendy Sherman, where she, let's see, no, it wasn't Wendy Sherman, but it was a female female American general, let's see if we find it. I have not I can't find it right now, but I'll look into it later. But nonetheless, they were suggesting, the United States was suggesting that maybe we can buy, Russian-made weapons, Russian weapons from Latin America and send to Ukraine. And in return, the United States will supply these Latin American countries with U.S.-made weapons. Now, that's a pretty desperate move because they were talking about some of America's most, worst enemies, right? I think it was Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. So, yeah, that just shows how bad the situation is. The belief in Washington is that Ukraine has spent considerable resources defending the city of Bakhmut, but that there is a high possibility that the Russians will eventually push the Ukrainians out of that town, the official said. Yep, because Russia has the industrial weapons capacity, and they have like 10 times more artillery. So if that happens, it will not result in any strategic shift in the battlefield, the official said. Well, they're going to lose their main supply line, which is Bakhmut. It sort of provides the troops in the Donbass region with all types of gear and whatever. It's a linchpin, basically. One consideration for the Ukrainians, the official said, is how much they continue to pour into defending Bakhmut at the time when they are preparing for an offensive to try the Russians out of areas they hold in southern Ukraine. Yes, they pour so much troops into Bakhmut that the Russians have made some advances in Zaporizhia, actually. The U.S. officials are working with the Ukrainians on this trade-off, the official said. On another front, U.S. officials are advising Ukraine to adjust how Kiev conducts the war away from trying to match Russia round for round with artillery fire, because ultimately Moscow will gain the advantage through attrition. And for those of you that haven't really understood this war correctly, this is a war of attrition. I mean, Surovikin, not just Surovikin, I mean, Vladimir Putin said in his speech before the military operations in Ukraine that he wants to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. So, demilitarization. Russia wants to destroy the Ukrainian army and preserve as much of their own troops as possible. That's why they retreated from Kherson and Kharkiv, because they were willing to give up territory to preserve the lives of their soldiers. The Ukrainians are doing the exact opposite of that. That is why the burn rate for the Ukrainian army is absolutely crazy, right? I think for every, like I've said before, for every Russian soldier that gets killed, eight Ukrainian soldiers get killed. So, yeah, preserving the lives of Russian troops is far more important than maintaining territory, because territory can be captured again, right? So, this is why the latest supply of U.S. supply of weaponry includes armored vehicles, because it will help Ukraine shift how it fights the war, the official said. Bad winter weather has hindered fighting on the front lines, although a cold snap that freezes and hardens the ground could pave the way for either side to launch an offensive with heavy equipment, Serhiy Haidai, governor of Ukraine's Luhansk region, said. The official said the United States does not plan at this juncture to send Abrams tanks to Ukraine because they are costly and difficult to maintain. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius on Friday denied Berlin was unilaterally blocking the shipment of Leopard main battle tanks to Ukraine, but said the government was ready to move quickly to send them if there was a consensus among allies. Well, Germany, you have absolutely been castrated. I mean, Jesus. There's really no balls in Olaf Scholz, to be honest with you. First he says he's not going to send them, then as soon as they put a little bit of pressure on him, he cracks. Okay, this is an article from Al-Mayadeen, and it goes like this. Ukraine should divert attention from Bakhmut, U.S. official. The United States advises Ukraine to withdraw from Bakhmut and focus on other areas of more strategic importance. Ukraine should not solely focus on defending Bakhmut at all costs and should instead use the window it has been given to prepare a major counteroffensive against Russia, a senior U.S. official said on Friday, according to the AFP. Russian forces continue to advance in Bakhmut toward the densely populated areas of the city, after they succeeded more than a month ago in tightening their siege on the Ukrainian forces present there, while they continue to bombard their positions with missiles and artillery. Well, actually, the battle for Bakhmut has been going on for like 6 months and has been mainly carried out by the Wagner PMC, right? One of the reasons why they didn't have major breakthroughs in the early stages was because the Russians did not supply enough troops to the battlefield. And that is actually why the Ukrainians managed to withhold in Bakhmut back then. And if we're speaking on other fronts, Kharkiv, Kherson, they managed to take these cities and areas because the defense line of the Russians were too thin. It was stretched out. Now the Ukrainians are doing the same mistake. Now that the Russians have sent reinforcements and reinforced the defense line, they are on the advantage now. They are on the offensive now, and the Ukrainians are the burn rate is absolutely horrendous, as I've said before. Let's see here. So, Russian forces continue to advance in Bakhmut toward the densely populated areas. I said that. Okay, meanwhile, a senior Biden administration said the focus on Bakhmut was hampering Ukraine, true, when it comes to preparing for a counteroffensive against Russia, in a bid to undermine the advances made so far by Russia in the south. The official told reporters on the condition of anonymity and not being quoted verbatim that Russia had the upper hand in Bakhmut, especially due to its artillery resources and manpower it had. He, however, claimed that Russia taking Bakhmut would not lead to a major shift in the war because Ukrainian troops would retreat to well-defended positions, contrary to what is being said in Western media. Well, will they though? Because if they lose Bakhmut, they will lose the whole supply line for the Donbass, if I understood it correctly. And many people speculate that the whole defense line then will collapse. Well, we'll see. The Russian Defense Ministry said earlier in the day that the Russian armed forces managed to take control of the village of Klishivka, located near Bakhmut, in the Donetsk People's Republic. This comes after the head of the Wagner Group private military company, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said Thursday that the village had been occupied. Western media have been speaking about the Battle of Bakhmut for over a month now, in which Kiev's allies feared that Russian control over it will be key to the collapse of the entire front in the hands of the Russian forces during the harsh winter, while Russian sources confirm that the Ukrainian forces and mercenaries are suffering heavy losses in lives and equipment. Yeah, that's what we said before. The US officials also explained that his country was advising Ukraine to take its forces out for refit and join US-led training programs that would equip them with capabilities that would allow them to launch an offensive in the south instead of expending so many soldiers and so much ammunition on Bakhmut, which he dubbed as a strategically unimportant target. Well, that last part is bullshit, but anyway. The Ukrainians need to consider the trade-off of holding on to Bakhmut versus preparing the broader strategic effort, the official said. Ukrainians may not have the resources to meet both challenges, he added. Yes, the reason also why the Russians don't really storm the city is because Ukraine is they just pour all their soldiers into Bakhmut, and they're just systematically grinding down the Ukrainian army, right? I mean, both sides have coined the term the Bakhmut meat grinder, a horrible expression, but that's what they call it, right? Because so many Ukrainian troops are being killed. And it's a shame, really. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it works in the favor of the Russians. I mean, you are demilitarizing Ukraine, right? But nonetheless, Bakhmut has been an important transport hub for supplying, and here's what I was saying, for supplying the Ukrainian troops in the Donbass during the Ukraine war. A U.S. official confirmed during a press briefing last Wednesday that the Russian army has made gradual progress in the city of Bakhmut, located on the western outskirts of the DPR. The Washington Post reported last week that Ukrainian military personnel said Kiev was mulling retreating from Bakhmut in order to save manpower and supplies in anticipation of a counteroffensive elsewhere. Yuri Skala, a Ukrainian commander of an intelligence battalion currently on the Bakhmut front lines, said, "I will support the commander-in-chief's decision to maneuver tactically and create a new line of defense if it becomes clear that casualties are too high." The Washington Post also revealed that several military analysts have agreed that on the grand scale of things, a withdrawal from Bakhmut would result in a great defeat from the political perspective, despite the fact that the city has little strategic importance. Well, it's not just political perspective, it's military perspective as well. Okay, but nonetheless. Moreover, Russian President Vladimir Putin said last week that his country's special military operation was going positively, saying that its dynamics were optimistic and stressing that everything was going to plan, according to plan. During the interview with the Russia 1 TV channel, Putin voiced his hope that Russian soldiers would once again please everyone with the results of their work. And let's go over to what's going on in Zaporizhia. So this is an Al Jazeera article. It says here, Russia advances towards two towns in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Moscow's forces have pushed towards the Ukrainian towns of Orikhiv and Hulayapol. Sorry if I butchered that name, according to Russian state media reports. Russian forces are pushing towards two towns in Ukraine's southern Zaporizhia region, where fighting intensified this week after several months of a stagnant front, Russian state media has reported. Vladimir Rogov, a Russian-installed official in the region, said offensive actions were concentrated around two towns. Orikhiv, around 50 kilometers, that's say 30 miles, south of Ukrainian-controlled regional capital Zaporizhia, and Hulaypol further east. The front is mobile, especially in two directions, Orikhiv and Hulaypol. Rogov was quoted as saying by the RIA Novosti news agency. He said there was active fighting in those areas, according to the agency. The initiative is in our hands. The Russian army later claimed for a second day in a row that it had taken more advantageous lines and positions after offensive operations in the Zaporizhia region. It claimed to have hit Ukrainian positions in the village of Lezoino, outside the regional capital of Zaporizhia, which has not fallen to Ukrainian forces, and Al Jazeera was not able to verify the reports. In its daily report on Sunday, the Ukrainian army said more than 15 settlements were affected by artillery fire in Zaporizhia. Earlier this week, Rogov announced a local offensive around Orikhiv and said the Russian army had taken control of the village of Lobkove, near the Dnieper River. He also said this week that fighting was sharply increased in the southern region. The front in southern Ukraine has been considerably quieter recently than in the east, with Moscow withdrawing from the major city of Kherson in November. Russia claims to have annexed the Zaporizhia region along with 3 other Ukrainian regions, but does not control it in its entirety. While Moscow controls the large swaths of the southern part of the region, its main city, Zaporizhia, and northern part are held by Kiev. The reports come, Russia warns the West. That's the headline, right? The reports come as Russian officials said that governments giving more powerful weapons to Ukraine could cause a global tragedy that would destroy their countries. I can't say his first name, so I'm going to say Volodin, the Speaker of the lower house of Russia's parliament, warned that country's decision to supply Ukraine would lead to a global catastrophe. If Washington and NATO supply weapons that would be used for striking peaceful cities and making attempts to seize our territories, as they threaten to do, it would trigger a retaliation with more powerful weapons, he said. Germany is one of the main donors of weapons to Ukraine, and it has ordered a review of its Leopard 2 stocks in preparation for a possible green light. Nonetheless, the government in Berlin has shown caution at each step of increasing its commitments to Ukraine, a hesitancy seen as rooted in its history and political culture. Meanwhile, France, Germany committed to showing unwavering support to Ukraine during ceremonies and talks Sunday celebrating the 60th anniversary of their post-World War II friendship treaty. In a joint declaration, the countries said they would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Well, damn. They also pledged to work together for a European Union that is more resilient, more sustainable, and more capable to act independently. Well, that's kind of laughable. Most of these European Union countries are nothing but American vassal states, getting their economies completely wrecked and plundered by the United States. But anyway, the treaty that sealed a bond between longtime enemies, France and Germany, 60 years ago, underpinned today's European Union. Germany's tentativeness has drawn heavy criticism, particularly from Poland and the Baltic states, countries on NATO's eastern flank that were controlled by Moscow in the past and that feel especially threatened by Russia's renewed imperial ambitions. I don't know what they mean by that last sentence, but anyway, we can go through that some other time, because it's bullshit, really. I mean, even in Putin's essay, I think it was, regarding Ukrainian-Russian history, although he considers Ukrainians a brotherly people and all this stuff, that he to a certain extent respects Ukrainian nationalism and national aspirations. Yeah. And Russia is not interested in taking Poland or the three dwarfs, that is to say the Baltic states. But nonetheless, Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki said that if Germany does not consent to transferring Leopard tanks to Ukraine, his country was prepared to build a smaller coalition of countries that would send theirs anyway. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the statements from the United States that Ukraine is getting absolutely, slaughtered in Bakhmut. And I'm not saying this with a, as a way to sort of mock the Ukrainian soldiers or anything, because I know a lot of, and there's a lot of reports that a lot of these young men, and to a certain extent also old men that are there, are actually forced to be there, and it's an absolute fucking tragedy, man. And that's why in the U.S., the United States, and the West are panicking. They're trying to, by saying that that Bakhmut is has no strategic importance. They're just coping, basically. Now they have to find a way to spin this in the media, so that the Western public keeps, supporting this cause, so to speak. But this is not getting any better. So yes, I want to thank everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.